Good evening. This is the July 10th Canby Urban Renewal Agency special meeting. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if we could have a moment of silence for the citizens that have been hurt and damaged in the events of the last week around the country. Thank you. We're going to have a small adjustment to the agenda as we go through. We'll do the first two items, consent agenda and citizen input and community announcements. And then under new business, we're going to take item D first, which is the discussion on the library location, options, and costs. And Renata from our Economic Development Department and Jamie called today and graciously suggested that we consider the library first because we have this panel of experts and it will be a interesting topic, I'm sure. So with that, the consent agenda, the only item on the consent agenda is the approval of the minutes from the June 12th meeting.
Chairman Ayers, I move to accept the minutes of approve the consent agenda, which include the approval of the minutes from the June 12th, 2013 agency meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Hodson, second by Commissioner Ryder, to approve the consent agenda, which consists of the approval of the minutes from the June 12th, 2013 meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Now is the opportunity for, well, first we're going to do community announcements. Sue, do you?
I did very brief tonight. The CTV5 has requested the blinds be kept shut to help with the quality of the video recording, because apparently they're getting too much glare. There are still available spots for summer swim lessons. The summer reading program at the library is underway, and just a reminder that juggler Kurt Carlisle will be performing this Friday, July 12th at 11 a.m. in Waite Park, weather permitting. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Now is the opportunity for citizen input, and this is for any citizen to make comments that is on anything that is not on the agenda this evening. Is anyone interested to make comments? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move into new business. First item on the agenda, or the first item we're going to consider tonight on the agenda is the discussion on library location, options, and costs. I'm anticipating this evening that there will be no public testimony. This is a meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency. It is a meeting in public. It is not a public hearing. That may change if the Commission wishes to do so after we have our discussion on the library. We'll take that as that occurs. So with that, we're going to open the discussion on library location, options, and costs. We have a panel of experts. We have Eric Wilcox and Troy Ainsworth from FFA, the architects of the current library plan. We have Frank Berg, who has been our project manager for both the police department and the library. And we have Haley Fish, who is our, you're not CFO, are you? You're the finance director from the city of Canby. So I'm going to start first with if there are any questions that commissioners would like to ask at this point, or based on what I've been hearing, there may be alternate motions that someone wants to put on the table for discussion of the library. Currently, the library is planned, and it's every day the staff comes in and works on the library, which is planned for 2nd Avenue. And if there's going to be a change of that plan, tonight's a good night to have that discussion. So, Amanda, do you want to open up any discussion, or do you have any comments that you would like to make at this point?
The only comments that I have is that we did invite this panel here because any questions that you might have, one of these people or Penny and I should be able to answer those, so there hopefully won't be any items left that we can't clarify or provide accurate information.
Okay.
So they're here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay.
Well, Chairman Ayers, I'll open it up with, just, I like a stab dialogue. I don't want us to go right into a motion of an up or down
Okay?
on the plan. I think that we've got a lot invested in this. We've got a lot of money invested in this. I think there's been a ton of dialogue, and I think that we need to, if it's going to be a vetting of options, that we have that discussion before we move into an up or down vote of not to do the project or to do the project. That's just again, my opinion on that. I don't know where the rest of the dais is at on that. If there's questions that want to be answered about the current project, I mean, I guess we can go through that process as well. I did come with a couple of other options for discussion, potentially. Would like to, put those out on the table before we decide if up or down. I think there is momentum going. I think that we do have things that we have put into place, that there has been a lot of time and effort by staff and volunteers to make this happen. And I think if we stop, we lose that. And maybe Penny can shed some light on the grant piece when we get there. It would seem to me that if we were to take a lengthy pause or a stop, that getting restarted would be very challenging and hard to do. Whereas if we can come up with something, if it's not this piece, then what is it, and how do we keep the momentum going? After our last meeting, I met with our city manager and had the dial. We were talking back and forth, and the question was simple. He's like, "So is it a funding issue that we're having, or is it the project issue?" And I think that that's the crux of the conversation. Is it the project or is it the funding? I think going after and building a new library and civic center is the right thing to do. I think we can argue that with urban renewal dollars effectively and what we can do to make that happen. I think, those pieces of it, that puzzle of it, is the challenging part of it. I know we've got some very strong opinions on urban renewal dollars on the dais and how it should be used, and that's worth being talked about, granted, and maybe what I propose isn't looked at, and so I don't know. So that's where I'm at right now.
Well, I'd like to point out that at the April 21st meeting, we had this discussion.
We did.
We stopped the library project, and then we started it again in the same night. And you said, we're all behind this now, we're moving forward. Now I understand we're not behind it now, and we're not moving forward. So I suggest you put something on the table that we can discuss that's concrete. Otherwise, we have a plan in place that's been approved by a majority of this body.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to throw out, then here's my pieces. So my proposal, it is a Third Avenue proposal. So I'm going to start going through my bullet points, so if I start going too fast, stop me. So the proposal that I have is acquire the properties behind the library and go out the back so that the library has the length that it needs. The height will be a story and a half for the first, a story and a half for the first and 1 story for the second story, and actually have a second floor to it. That way we get the light, if we go a story and a half, we can still add the light and whatnot.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand what you're describing. Could you be more specific?
Sure, so so instead of a traditional 2-story looking building with 2 floors, that the first floor, we create more of a story and a half for each floor, so that we have that vaulted higher ceiling area piece that we were trying to achieve with our current building, and we can have that will still achieve some of that natural light components that we've been trying to achieve. And that might be something that Troy can maybe better elaborate than I am. I'm not an architect. I'm just, going with what I'm trying to do there. The second floor will be City Hall offices and council chambers with space for CTV5 to conduct its business. and perhaps City Hall records for storage. This room leaves room for City Hall to expand over the next generation if it needs to. Yes, it will need stairs and an elevator. It's 2 floors. If the current library structure is not suitable, then we scrape it and start fresh. I know that drives up the cost. This will require moving the old library. You know, right now, we have the old Rite Aid location is open if we need to do a quick move, if we need to get moving on this. When this is done, city staff can move from the City Hall, Transit, Finance, and Planning, and the library can move back into their new building. City Hall, we can renovate that to now house perhaps the Chamber of Commerce and Tourism office for a lifelong monthly lease. The basement and/or upstairs could be their storage area. This could also be additional office space for our other nonprofits to use as they see fit. The court space area, or that was there, could become a space for business incubator or the Friends of the Library bookstore that has its own operating hours, and they're not tied to the current library. Council chambers, gets demoed and paid for city parking for the time being. We draft official offer paperwork with Cub to swap the old police department with their 2nd Avenue lot. The finance and CAT building, we either lease out until we have a developer that wants that property, the Cub parking lot and city parking lot and planning, and kind of a larger development, being able to bring the lands together. The planning building, same thing, we lease that out until we are ready to sell part of it as a land package. The other piece with that is looking down the road and looking at our transportation system plan. Ivy is an intersection that is failing and dramatically impacted. We have an opportunity there. We could perhaps widen that and add a turning lane right there at Ivy and First and bring that further back into to bring, you know, more, try to alleviate the congestion piece of it. Questions for me that not ironed out yet on this plan. The cost, it is more, as we saw from the numbers from Frank and Troy, that we definitely drive up the cost of the project. I don't know if this can be a phased project. If so, how many different phases? How long will it take to build up cash reserves to do each phase? Will we have to wait to purchase the land, or can we purchase and lease out until the money is raised? And what are the costs of the properties behind? That I know we don't know. I have an idea. You know, do we need all of them, or is it, you know, or we only need some of them? According to my conversations with our city manager, we have met the first couple years of the bond spending, so we have time to look at this and store cash. I've also asked him to look into an extension of the next couple years of the bond payment piece. So if it's a phased project, we can achieve that. So great, sounds great. How do we pay for this? Okay, so we use the money we have now, which I think we'll get numbers of where we're at now, which is 10.2 million from what I have in my notes from URD bonds. We use the 553,000 that we have from this year's URD budget and the use of that budget for the next 3 years. Library and Friends of the Library, ask them to raise additional money. If that's increasing fees, more going out to organizations. If I have to help, I will knock on doors, write letters, go to the voters and of the library district for bonding. All those numbers to me come up to plus or minus $15 million, and everyone has skin in the game. We can speed up the payoff of the citizen bond when we sell the 2nd Avenue properties and use that money from the chamber's lease of City Hall. This keeps the library by the park, achieves a new library civic complex that gives us efficiencies and operational savings, frees up 2nd Avenue for commercial development, brings people downtown and keeps them there longer, doesn't exacerbate the parking issues that have been raised by some people, and we will experience with, I think, a 2nd Avenue build-out. Where I come from with this, this is something that I do. I think about this quite a bit. I have talked with a couple of developers in the area, as well as commercial real estate people that talk about Second Avenue as being a great place for commercial development. I know that we've had testimony from, I think our last meeting, that First Avenue might not be a great commercial development. I don't agree with that. I think First and Second are what will draw people in when there's that kind of activity of restaurants and retail and those kinds of things. So that is my proposal. That is my one of the three that I have. Questions, comments?
Well, it's quite broad-reaching.
It is. I don't deny that.
You know, it's, in my personal opinion, I think you're going to have a hard time describing to the community, and particularly those in opposition to the current plan, of why we go from 10.5 million to 15 million. I know, and I came prepared with a few questions for our panel of experts, but you've already mentioned that the cost of the building from what Frank Berg and his group, and I believe the FFA was somewhat involved in this. The cost estimate of the Third Avenue Library Administration Building is in the ballpark of $4 million more than we are spending now with the current plan. And for those that may not be familiar with the current plan is the library on this block. We have to resolve the Cub parking lot issue, which I think can be done, and then converting the current City Hall into council chamber meeting rooms that can be used by the library and the public and the City Council, and then converting the current library into administrative facilities. So you're probably very accurate on the 5 million extra. I think from personal experience, the cost of acquiring those properties along Third Avenue are going to be considerably more than you think. You will not get them for tax-assessed market value. It will be considerably more expensive. My other questions, you talked about the second story. Oh, well, the second story over the library and so on. I think while that plan is interesting, I think it's 3 years late. You know, I've been on the council 4 years, and we've been talking about the library for 4 years, and we came to this location. That's a hard sell. I don't think with the attitude of some of the Urban Renewal Agency board members, commissioners, I don't think there's an appetite for more urban renewal money to be spent on the project than we've already committed, and there's no appetite to spend what we've committed to it. So I think it's going to be a hard sell. I think this is a 3 to 5 year plan at best.
Well, and I understand that. I understand your comments too about we have been talking about the library. Yeah, it has been a long conversation, and I wish I had a sound explanation as to where was this a year ago or 2 years ago. That, you know, there's not a whole lot I can say about that right now.
It's been approved 3 times. 3 votes in the positive. I have a question. I have 2 questions. One has to do with the grants, and one has to do with something that Amanda had a phone call yesterday, I believe, from the county administrator or assistant county administrator, deputy. And can you relate that conversation? And this has to do with the $1 million grant from the county library.
Sure, absolutely. Laura Buttman, I believe is her name, she contacted me yesterday and said that she was inquiring about some questions that were from her board about our library project, and that they had heard that we were no longer funding that project, and they were interested in maybe seeking to get that $1 million back. I did inform her that the project was still going forward, that was still funded as of when I talked to her yesterday. I did ask for some clarification on what would happen to that $1 million. She did confirm, obviously, if we cancel a project, we don't have a project, we give the $1 million back. As far as other uses for it, whether it's a different location or remodel of a current site, they said that they would probably not take it back as long as we could meet the standards that need to be met.
And do we know what those standards are? Are those the Library Association
Well, yeah,
standards?
one of the primary standards is the square footage for the population that we serve.
Right.
And our current library is at 11,000 square feet, and that is about half of what, to meet the standard, we would need to acquire. As I understand it, the $1 million grant that's available to each city that has a library in the Link District, it's not necessarily, not every community needs a new library. So some of them have used it to purchase additional parking or, but there is no question that for us to receive the $1 million, we needed to present a plan. If the current library were not to go forward, we would need to present another plan. There's precedent where plans changed with another city and they've asked for the money back.
Second question has to do with the grants, and these are the foundations that have committed, and last I heard about $620,000 of commitments. What would be the status of those grants if we decide to pursue a different plan or investigate?
Well, again, there's about, we've gotten grants from the 4 major funders in Oregon: Ford Family Foundation, $200,000 challenge grant; Meyer Memorial Trust, $175,000; the Collins Foundation, which is a $50,000 challenge grant; the Oregon Community Foundation, which is $30,000. We've also received a $10,000 grant from the Wichita Falls Area Community Foundation, an advised fund there that supports rural libraries in Oregon. So that totals $465,000. In each case, what we presented to them was a plan that was specific to what we're doing. In I think every case, we hosted site visits, we walked them through, we showed them the plan, we talked about how every, the funding, the total funding picture. There's no question in my mind, and I've discussed this with Sharon Lechty, who's our fundraising consultant, who's worked with organizations all over the state, that should the Second Avenue not go forward, we really have no option but to go to them and say, this project isn't going forward. Here, we're either returning the money or we're not going to fulfill the challenge grant. That is, they didn't give us a blank check to improve our library. They looked very specifically at the plan, and that's what they approved. So there's also no question that were we to do that, our potential to go back to them at some later date and get this kind of funding is very, very questionable. This is a grand slam. This is what we have from the funders around the state. The major foundations is a huge endorsement for this project and a huge vote of confidence for the city of Canby. And the perception will be that the city has, for whatever reason, chosen not to move forward with it, does not want to partner with them. And it will probably have an impact beyond the city and the library to organizations in Canby as a whole. I'd also like to mention that in addition to the $465,000 from foundations, we've raised almost $11,000 from 82 local donors. That's everywhere from a $25 check to a $1,000 check. That's individuals, that's families, that's local businesses. Again, that was from a solicitation that talks specifically about the Second Avenue site. I think ethically we would need to return that money because we aren't doing the project. So that's a huge impact. The other piece I just wanted to mention in relationship to funding, Brian, I think you mentioned in your plan that obviously the fundraising piece, we've been focusing on the foundations where we will continue to pursue smaller gifts in that realm, but where our focus really is going to be shifting will be on local donations. And that is largely going to be the work of the Library Foundation and the individuals in the community, the volunteers who have chosen to take on that work, who have participated in the site visits, who are educated in the process, who are excited about it. I don't think it's a given that those individuals, based on what they've told me, are going to sign up again if the work that they've done so far is essentially jettisoned. They're not, you can speak to them directly, but what I have heard is that people do not feel that they have been willing to step up and make a contribution to raise $1 million so the city doesn't have to raise it, essentially. They feel the Second Avenue is a good plan. Lastly, the other thing I'd like to mention on funding is you mentioned bonding. And so I want to just briefly go through some information I presented in March of 2011 about bonding and how that would impact a new library. We have a permanent rate for our library district, which is 39 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. But not everybody we serve in this library is within the city limits. So we can't legally superimpose another library-related district on our service area, so we could only tax city residents for a library bond. In a sense, it's very similar to the swim center. So if we look at what a bond raises, for every $1 million we borrow or bond, it would require 7 cents per $1,000 of assessed value added to people's taxes. So to raise $1 million, you add 7 cents. To raise 3, you add 21 cents. To raise 5, you're adding 35 cents per $1 million of assessed value. So given that people within the city are already paying $39.74 per $1,000 of assessed value, you're almost doubling the impact on them to improve library services. So I think what I have argued all along, it's a better value to the taxpayers to find a way to fund a new library that doesn't increase their taxes, which is the plan we have now.
Thanks. I don't want to dominate the questions. Is there other people that have questions? I still have a few more, but
I have some. I could share just a few comments more than anything. I'm just proud of this community that obviously cares a great deal about what's going on, and I think that's very fortunate that we have that. I also think we're very fortunate to have the panel here of experts, and I'd certainly like to hear from them talk about the pros and the cons of the Third Avenue versus the Second Avenue and why they support the Second Avenue. Because I think, this plan that's on the table is a very well thought out plan. It's very specific in its cost, specific in its plan. It solicited tremendous input from the community. And if there's to be a plan B, I believe that plan B would have to not only be more cost effective at this time in our economy, but it would have to be very specific. And in order for the community to get behind it, I can't get behind a plan if I don't know what it is, what it costs, and how it would benefit us. Another thought that I've heard a little bit about is, in my view, between First and Second Avenue, if you look at the current footprint, the city, the Cub, the Cat, takes up about 80% of this block, with 20% Oliver Insurance. As I see it, under this proposed library plan on Second Avenue, between the library and the City Hall, that would actually reduce the city footprint to about 50%. And if Cat relocates and Cub actually sells, that leaves 50% open for business. So, again, for us, or for myself, to support a Plan B this late in the game, it would have to be very specific, and it would have to make more financial sense than, what we've seen. And so I'm just looking forward to hearing from the panel on the pros and cons of both and how they arrived at the Second Avenue.
I would make a suggestion then that our architects provide an answer first, because they have been working on this for multiple years. We're the first group to vet the First Avenue, Second Avenue, and then Third Avenue options. And then most recently, we had our project managers put together a budget for us. So maybe we could start with the architects.
Before you begin, Troy, just remind us when you started the feasibility planning and studying of the library issue here in Canby. How many years ago was that?
We started to assist in
October.
fall of 2009, and that was a revisiting and updating of the needs assessment that had been done on multiple city facilities back in 2005. Our scope at that time was just to focus on the library and update the needs assessment for the library. And so it was a very limited scope of work that we did then. That established the recommendation for square footage and the library program parts and pieces. And then 2010, we did our first kind of feasibility study for how would this program, where should it go, and how would it fit. And at that time, the focus was on the First Avenue, what's being referred to as the First Avenue
Right.
site, which is the other side of this block. And we found that the library fit, and there was discussion at the time also that 10,000 square feet be set aside for city offices. And our scope of work at that time didn't include any architectural, it was just planning, no architectural design, so we just kind of were seeing how would things fit. At that point, the project kind of took a back burner. And then when it came back to us, we were looking at a couple of options for either the Second Avenue site or the Third Avenue site. So there'd be the site, the Second Avenue site, this site, or the Third Avenue site, the half block roughly where the library is right now on the west end of that half block. So we found that in both cases the library fit, but there were a lot of other things that we started to think about as well. Particularly, Penny and the city were interested in how could the best value be obtained by the funds that were going to be made available. There had been a lot of discussions about funding, and we'd done some cost estimates, and the funding was set at the level it is now, based on our preliminary work. So what we as planners, as well as Penny and the city, were looking at is how can we get the best value for the funds that have been set aside. And we were thinking about construction of a new library, but also how could the existing city hall be repurposed? How could the existing stock of buildings be reused in the most efficient manner? How could the least amount of properties need to be either swapped or purchased? So it wasn't just design and it wasn't just cost that we were starting to think about last year. So when we presented the two site options, it was fairly clear that for the money, the Second Avenue site was preferred because it used existing building stock to the best degree. It meant no lease for temporary housing of the library. It meant the project could be phased in construction, so people had to do the least amount of moving. It meant that properties that are privately held now wouldn't have to be purchased. Businesses that are there wouldn't have to be moved out. So there were a lot of things to recommend the Second Avenue site. That isn't all of them, but those are the ones I can recall in summary right now. So the other thing, once we kind of got Second Avenue as the preferred option out on the table, you guys kind of said, well, let's make sure we do our homework. And you asked us to do what we call a due diligence study with our engineers of the existing city hall and the existing library building to make sure that, you know, are these buildings really technically capable of being repurposed for a reasonable price? Good questions. So we and our engineers took a look at them and augmented our study with a report on each building. And the bottom line was both of them do have some issues, but they're not major, and they would not overly impact the budget, so that the benefits that I've just discussed about the Second Avenue plan were not overtaken by costs trying to fix the old buildings. So we performed that, we added that to the mix, and it kind of basically augmented with more technical detail what could be done with the existing city hall and the existing library buildings. So that then bolstered the idea that it made sense to build a new library here, have the existing city hall building repurposed as the city council chambers with backup office space. And in kind of a stroke of luck that doesn't happen very often in planning, it so happens that the existing library building is 11,000 square feet. And that is just roughly, basically, the size of office space that is needed for the city agencies that would be moved. So we thought that's a mighty good happenstance. We did some preliminary planning to see if they'd fit. The existing library is a box, fairly square, so it doesn't have any weird spaces. And we found that the city offices conceptually would fit quite well there. So that's how we got to the plan that was approved by you all back in August of last year. Did I?
Well, I think a couple of things that Troy didn't mention. One, we did have a traffic study updated for the downtown core, and the net result of that was that no additional street improvements or traffic improvements would need to be made. As we went through the planning process with the planning commission, we modified and were able to resolve some traffic pattern issues that they brought up to, I think, everybody's benefit. Then we also had one thing about the existing library is that building was built, the original buildings were built in 1960 and shortly thereafter, and they're basically a one-story building. To repurpose that into a multi-story building is not feasible. The roof structure, is a lightweight wood frame, not capable of carrying a second floor. The exterior walls are load-bearing cast concrete, and probably not capable of carrying that added structural load. So to repurpose that for anything other than a one-story building would probably require it to be torn down and rebuilt from ground up. And I think that's pretty much it. I think that Troy pretty well covered the basic scenario today.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions, Clint, at this point?
No, appreciate it.
I have another one, and this is for Haley. It may be an unfair question, but you might be prepared for it. If we were to abandon the Second Street plan and start looking at Third Avenue or something else, how much money have we spent that cannot be reused? In other words, it doesn't give us any benefit if we go to Third Avenue.
So I can tell you how much money has gone out the door, and I can tell you how much we've encumbered in signed contracts. I can't tell you how much of those contracts we would have to pay out even if we didn't go forward. That's more of a question probably for our attorney. And as far as getting any value out of the engineering work and other work that's been done, that's probably a better question for them. But I'm going to do the numbers, and then we can have them follow up.
Okay.
So in December of last year, we issued a bond which had net proceeds of $56,773. That was broken out between the library and city hall renovation. Was allocated $8.5 million. The Sequoia Parkway extension was allocated $4.2 million. We refunded debt for just over $2.2 million, and we had $153,000 of bond issuance costs. So far, money that has gone out the door on the library project is just over $330,000. And we've encumbered about $675,000. So
675?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that would leave the remaining bond proceed balance of approximately $7.5 million. So we've spent if we end up having to make good on all of the contracts that we've signed to date, just over $1 million on just the library.
So when you said.
Well, library and city hall.
So we've encumbered 675, so that's, define encumbered.
Encumbered is, so when we encumber something when we have a signed contract. So we've committed to getting service from someone for a specific amount.
Okay.
That's when we put it into our accounting system as encumbered.
Thank you. Troy and Eric, how much of the work that you have done on the Second Avenue facility, design, architectural planning, all the things you guys do, how much of that can be reused at a different place? Or do you start from scratch?
We would, on a different site, we, as well as the other consultants that have been engaged, would have to start over. Essentially, except for the study work that we did last year, the basic programming of what's required for the library, but essentially, that can be reused, but essentially everything we've done since we started in December is specific to this site, this concept. So the work that we've done, the work that Frank's firm's done, the work that the other consultants, the geotechnical folks, the survey folks, the hazardous material folks, geotechnical people, would all be done, need to be done over again.
And if I can actually take that one step further, if this project changes, we actually have to go out to bid to get new project managers and architects all over again.
So
I believe that
And
to be
the
correct.
contractor.
And contractor.
The contracts that are presently out for the architects, myself, and our CMGC all have termination clauses. None of them have standby or, you know.
Right. So you're just saying what Amanda said, that we start literally
Start
from
all over.
scratch?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That pretty much is my list of questions. Are there, Tim?
Haley, I know about encumbrances for Emmerich was around 24,000, I think, on the first phase. What else do we have encumbrances in terms of contracts?
So it would be for like FFA, Frankfurt. I don't have a listing of all of them here. I just have a total value. But I think those are the big ones.
And so even if at this point there's a guaranteed payout of 675,000?
That's what I said. I don't know what they guaranteed. Do you know what the termination clauses do they have? Anything? Any?
Actually, because of where we're at, they'd be pretty simply stop it. Running the bill.
Okay.
And I would say that the figures that I have are based on the cash we've paid as of 6/30. So anything that they've incurred that they haven't billed us for would not be included in my figures. We would have to pay for that portion of it.
Yeah, I would mention that the team is in full gear. We're working on what's called the construction documents phase. We have been working on that phase for 7 weeks.
Yes.
We have turned in permit drawings to Clackamas County. So the team of architects and engineers is working at full speed right now to finish the construction documents. Right now, our schedule calls for us to finish those documents in early September. So as of today, we're about halfway through construction documents.
I might just mention that, and the team has all acknowledged this project at this location, budget, schedule, and everything has gone just perfectly. I don't know how that happened because it doesn't generally happen on any project that I work on. But our budget has been confirmed by our general contractor that we're looking fine, our schedule looks good, and we're pushing straight ahead. And there shouldn't be any flaws with what we perceive as a finish date for the budget that we have.
Well, except for the one unresolved issue, which is our issue, and that's between us and Code to secure the last piece of property to get the thing built on there. So.
Maybe I have one more question.
We just pop back to Third Avenue for a second, because I think a lot of people don't realize the layers of complication there. Aren't there 5 additional properties that would need to be acquired?
There's 4,
Okay.
if we ran the whole block.
Yeah, I just, okay. Thank you.
I think if I might add, the Second Avenue site, when we originally approached it with the properties, was, one of the big benefits was there wasn't any additional property purchase. There was a big swing in the decision between the Second and Third Avenue site was, at the time, that the idea was to get a trade between the city and Cub for the police station parking lot. As it evolved, we all know how it's evolved since then, but the decision to go from, one of the prime issues that came up was this domino effect of being able to build on this site, Second Avenue site, and move city offices into the library and not have to purchase additional properties, either private or public, displace businesses, displace tax revenue from existing businesses in downtown Camden, which is my understanding also, part of the URA requirement would be to fund the cost to relocate those businesses, in my understanding. So the idea of this, the whole domino effect of the Second Avenue site really fell into place pretty quickly and succinctly.
And just a quick clarification for the record, the initial swap was this Second Avenue for the parking lot behind Cat.
And if I could add one more thing for the folks here and at home too, your estimates, I believe, put that Third Avenue project, not counting the purchases of the properties behind, assuming that could all fall into place, at over 13.5 million, isn't that correct?
Well, yes, we each, just to vet this, we did a summary estimate, and ours was just shy of 14 million. Frank Berg did one, and his was just shy of,
Well, just shy of 15 million, 14%. A few things that we included. This is, yeah, we included inflation. This project, if we shifted a minimum of 24 months, so we'd have to add, and we had an accelerator of about 3% a year for that, which comes up to about 603,000. The other thing is we did keep the city hall renovation, you know, in the parley here, so that was approximately $1 million. But it's more money.
Yeah, but
We
again,
feel really good about the estimate because the estimate that we used was based on the estimate that the architects had provided, the cost per square foot, that was confirmed by our CMGC recently, so we felt really, really good about that. And all of the soft costs, if you look at the budget, this is our typical budget, it's what we used on the police facility, and it complements all those costs that we had for the police facility, and also that we're looking to incur, you know, with the library on 2nd Street. So all it was just a complete shift. The using the construction costs as the ratio or the multiplier to increase all the other soft costs.
but again, none of your estimates included purchasing more property, the purchase price of the property.
No.
Okay.
Or a temporary lease space for the library,
Right.
Or moving us twice.
or moving you twice.
One more?
So a question for Penny. In order to get the $1 million in capital improvement money from the library district, we need to be at around 23,000 square feet. Is that,
Well,
did I
that's
hear you
one
right?
of the standards. No, I wouldn't say that's a requirement, but in general, they are looking at whatever proposal that the cities come to get the $1 million is how is it going to help you meet those standards. So I think that the plan that we have does a better job of that than the renovating that we have, which doesn't really get us
very far, because the spaces that we need for the library are things we can't add the space to the space we have. We have no meeting room, We have no adequate children's area, we have no teen center, we have no spaces, study areas for people, we have no enough computer sections, so we really can't meet that need in the current building. So if the library was extended out for the whole block, we would have more room. But one of the issues with the Third Avenue site versus the Second Avenue site is that you either would keep the entrance where it is, so you've got this long tunnel, which creates some operational issues and some, versus on the Second Avenue site where it's on the other side of the block. If we were to put that on the Third Avenue site, it's facing, it opens up to Third Avenue, which is not a frequently transversed street. You want the opening of the library to be a place where people are already at. So the orientation doesn't work on Third Avenue as it does on Second Avenue, because Second Avenue is more in the middle of the downtown area. So it's problematic. And so you put it on the whole block, but if you put a second story on that, let's say, according to the architects, we need to build a whole new building, you would almost need the entire block, 25,000 square feet, because if there's a second story, you have to put an elevator in, you have to put stairs, and that loses square footage for the library if it's on the main floor.
Right, and if we were starting over clean, the siding of the entrance can be dealt with.
Well, what I'm saying is you either have Holly or you have Third Avenue.
Right.
So if it's Holly, you've got a long tunnel, and if it's Third Avenue, you're facing sort of, you're not even really facing downtown, I would argue. So I'm not sure that could be changed. That's the site.
Yeah,
You're either-
well,
Right.
I
It
don't want
faces
to
the park,
design the
though.
entrance, but.
Right.
Our library operating funds are not tied to the square footage of the building, correct?
They are not.
Okay, so if we were forced to a smaller footprint, that's not affected. If we were forced to a smaller footprint, it would be up to the library district board to make a decision as to how much money we would qualify for in terms of capital improvement.
You know, I don't think it's going to get looked at to that degree of detail. I think they want a general plan. Are you improving the library and moving towards the service standards? But certainly, given that we've got a current plan that does meet those standards, to go back and say, oh, we're not going to do that. Let's do something that bumps up the square footage or maintains existing square footage. I think that might be a little problematic.
Okay, just trying to figure out
Yeah.
where our boundaries are there. And I just want to confirm, we'd had a report, I thought, when I first came back on the council, that the existing building on Third Avenue could support a second story, but your professional opinion you're telling us tonight is that really is not a workable option?
Anything's possible if you spend enough money on it. To give you a for sure answer, we probably have to do more investigation. Right now, we know that the roof needs to be fixed just as it is to be a good roof. So if you're looking to put a second story on there, it's likely that you'd have to remove a good chunk of or all of the roof structure to create a floor. And if it's a library, you're talking about higher loading than you have for office or other uses. So it's highly unlikely that the roof would be able to be reused as a floor. And then you have, what do you have left? You have 4 walls and some columns. They're probably in the wrong place. So when you start talking, yeah, so short answer is yeah, and I think in our professional opinion, it would not be money well spent to try to reuse what little would be left of that building to put a second story on. Is it possible? Yes. Would it be recommended? Probably not.
And it may even be more cost effective just to scrape and
Yeah.
start over.
Yeah.
Correct.
The soil bearing capacity around here, we have just, from our soils, our geotech, is around 2,000 pounds. The loading on the roof in the Willamette Valley is somewhere around 35 pounds, and that includes live and dead load. So the loading over there and what the bearing capacity is of the existing footings would be somewhere in that area. To put a second floor on it, you'd be looking as high as 100 pounds per square foot. So you can see that the footings to resist the bearing capacity would have to go up sometimes twice to 3 times, maybe 4 times as much.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Just trying to understand.
I think, Penny, I appreciate the picture of coming out of the library and you come out and whether it's in the middle of the block and you look at, is that the Bettis building right across the street there? And, again, the cost, we keep coming back to the cost, and it is a lot of money. I'm not denying that. I've never shied away from it being about what do we want and what do we envision Canby to be for our downtown. There are a number of people in the community that don't want the library downtown. They want it out of downtown. I want it downtown. I think it's important for the downtown. I just am having a very hard time coming up with and getting on board with good when I think we have the potential to do great. We owe to do great. And it is a lofty plan. It is an incredible stretch of a plan. And it would be hard work. Conversation being that well, we did this one because it was the easier option. Okay, well, easier and cheaper doesn't necessarily mean better and right. And so I appreciate the feedback, gentlemen, and staff as well. I want us to try to. I would really want us to try to. To do that. I just think what we've got is good, and I think we can do better. And if here we are. If it's a matter of an argument of being late to the dance on this, then that's I accept responsibility for that. And we've got we're looking at 6%, $675,000. Encumbered. New word for tonight is encumbered. That's 6% of the project. I get that we'd have to go back and we would have pieces that we'd have to go back and fix. And is that, I don't know. I'm not a grant writer. I don't know. I don't have interactions with those communities and what that would entail to try to mend those fences. But I think, to move Canby, and we look at what we're doing to this with this project, we're reshaping downtown really for a generation, and we get one shot at it. And no, I don't know that 3rd Avenue is better than 2nd. Greg Ellis and I keep going back and forth about this, what makes you right in versus, on 3rd versus 2nd. It's my opinion. I've got conversations with commercial developers and commercial salespeople that they tell me 2nd Avenue is a great place to build and grow the downtown. And I think, yes, now you come out and it may be the Bettis building that you're looking at, but in 20 years that might be a whole new block because we've been able to stretch the growth of downtown that direction and really make an impact and a statement. That's why I present that particular plan tonight.
Greg?
Actually, Tracy, go ahead. I'll defer to you if you've got something, because mine had more to do on process. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, where to begin here? First, I want to say I think that Commissioner Hodson has some great ideas that should be explored. I have lots of notes, so forgive me here. I have, I think, 3 major areas in which this project gives me heartburn, and none of them have to do with building a library or not. I like libraries. In fact, my children are just going to participate in the funding and the reading program. But my biggest issue, and has been the same since the beginning, and that's the funding mechanism. And I'm not going, some people say I sound like a broken record, and some thank me for my consistency. But the urban renewal district reduces the revenue to the general fund. There's no way around that. It does. It reduces the funding to fire, schools, etc., in a hope that the improvements will then generate more revenue to those funds when the district is closed, based on the improvements we make. Building civic projects doesn't generate a dime of revenue, and we all know that. There's no taxes that are coming from any city properties. And I believe that it's not smart to use urban renewal money to build a civic project. That hasn't changed. I also hear many folks that are upset with the fact that there's a library district that serves, Penny, I'm thinking 25,000 folks? 23,000 people, where our city limits is just under 16,000. And as Penny said, the city would be paying for the building. And that would be the case in urban renewal